Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Layla, and for today's video, I want to go over a few quick budgeting tips. So at this point, I've worked with dozens of people from all sorts of backgrounds, and something that I work on with every single one of my clients is creating a budget and maintaining budgeting. And throughout these sessions, I've realized that there's been some recurring questions or confusion when it comes to certain parts of budgeting. My approach to budgeting is very simple, just because that's how I prefer for things to be. I mean, when you watch my monthly budget videos and recap videos, you can see that things are pretty straightforward just because that works best for my brain, and that's also what I teach to my clients and use when I work with my clients. There are some people who prefer for things to be more colorful or more complex, and that is completely fine. The most important thing is finding things that work for you. The way that I teach things and do things may not work for everybody, but the things that I'm going to talk about in this video, I find to be best practice to keep things simple and consistent. And of course, I quickly want to plug my one-on-one sessions. I do have spots available. I am now a full-time content creator and financial coach, so I am very much looking forward to expanding my clientele and working with more people. So if you're interested, or if you think somebody else may be interested and you want to share with them, I have my link down below, and also let me know if you have any questions. The first thing we're going to cover is money coming in and money coming out, and how best to organize that within your budget. I do prefer creating a monthly budget. Even for people who are paid weekly or bi-weekly, you can still create a monthly budget and be able to track what comes in and what goes out for that month. At the end of the day, the most important thing is that you are creating a realistic budget that you will stick to, and then tracking your spending. So sometimes people get really caught up on their paychecks when they receive them and how they're allocating that money. My approach to this, again, is I like to keep things simple. So whatever is coming to me in the month, whatever income I am receiving in the month that I am tracking or budgeting for, is what I put in the tracker for that month. So let's say we're making a budget for June, or we are tracking our spending and income throughout June. Whatever I get paid, if I get paid on June 15th and on June 30th, then I am counting that as my income for June. And then same thing goes for spending. Whatever money that I spend in June, even if it's on June 30th, I am going to track it for June. Otherwise, things can get really confusing and just end up making a mess with your spending. And it's also really important not to complicate things. So just remember, whatever comes in and whatever goes out goes to that month that you are budgeting and tracking for. And that leads me to the next area I want to talk about, which is spending on a credit card in one month, but actually paying for that credit card in the following month. So let's say you make a purchase at the end of May on a credit card. Personally, and what I typically have my clients do, is track that spending. So whatever you charge to your credit card at the end of May, you're going to track that for May. And even if you end up making that payment in June, you still are tracking it in May. Again, the reason I prefer to do this is to keep things simple, because if you made that purchase in May, you're going to see the transaction as occurring in May. And yes, you will be actually paying it in the following month. This doesn't mean that you're being charged interest or anything. There are some times that this happens just naturally. You may make a purchase at the end of the month, or you may not hit your statement date yet, so you're going to wait to pay it in the following month. But I still prefer you to track your purchase for the month that you actually purchase it in. And then that leads to the next area I want to talk about. How do you handle or keep track of your floating credit card debt? I actually got that term, floating credit card debt, from Michael from Midlife Money Moves. He has a YouTube channel. He always used this term, floating credit card debt, and I really liked it, so I've picked up on it and have continued to use it. But floating credit card debt is not the same as revolving credit card debt. So revolving credit card debt is when you have a balance on your credit card all the time that is gaining interest, like you have actual credit card debt. But a floating credit card balance is not actually gaining any interest. So you are paying it off every single month, or at least before the statement, where it's not going to be reported on your credit report, and it's also not going to gain any interest. And this is something that occurs pretty frequently. That's even for myself and my clients. So going back to that example where you pay something at the end of the month, that balance is going to float into the following month where you then would pay it off. It's not going to accrue any interest, and that is completely normal and okay for that to happen. But of course, it is something that you want to keep track of and make sure you pay it off so that no interest is accrued on it and so that it's not reported to the credit bureaus. It's also a number I like to account for in my net worth calculation. So let me talk about that first. So whenever I'm putting my numbers together at the end of the month, this is outside of my budget. So I've already recorded my income, my spending, all of that for my budget. But y'all know that on a monthly basis, I'm also tracking my net worth, which is something I encourage everybody to do. So at the end of the month, I am logging my final balances in my savings, in my investment accounts, as well as in my checking accounts. Now, if I have any of that floating credit card debt, I have my checking account amount listed, and then whatever I owe on credit cards, I subtract that from my checking account balance, so it's accounted for in my net worth. Whatever I owe on my credit card is subtracted from my net worth, so I know my numbers are as accurate as possible. Now, if you're somebody who has a heavy amount of credit card debt, I suggest not using a credit card. There are some exceptions to that. Maybe you want to pay for absolute necessities like gas and groceries with your credit cards, but even that can be too much for some people to manage. Like, you just may end up going into further credit card debt, and obviously we want to prevent that. But if you are somebody who has that floating credit card balance but not revolving credit card debt, then there are a few ways that you want to track this just so you can maintain things and make things easier. So the first thing would be setting up auto payments. If you are confident that you always have enough money in your checking account to pay for any of that floating credit card balance, then you can set up those auto payments. You don't even have to worry about it. The whole balance will just be paid for on your payday or before your payday, and then you'll have a $0 balance. Honestly though, what I do is I just log into my accounts fairly frequently. There are a few cards that I know that I use on a regular basis. So I make a purchase on that card, and then in a few days I log in and just pay the full balance. That's just something I've come to build a habit out of, and it's something that I don't mind doing. So that's how I prefer to handle things. But I know not everybody wants to be so involved with their finances. So the other option is to keep track of things in your spreadsheet. So if there are any balances on your credit cards at the end of the month and when you're putting everything together, go ahead and log those balances along with your savings, your investments, and your checking accounts. Next, let's talk about money that rolls over from the previous month into the current month. Where do you track that? Some people don't care to look at the balance that rolls over from the previous month into the current month, but most of my clients do prefer to track this, and this is something that I recently started tracking for myself as well and including in my budget. So I'm going to pop up an example of what that would look like. So the spreadsheets that I use for my clients, and I actually have these linked down below, you can get this for free. There's a section for income, and this is income that's actually coming in for the month from your job, from your side hustles, from whatever it is, actual income coming in. But beneath that, I have an area for tracking money that already exists or that is coming to you that's not actual income. So this area is where people would typically put rollover, and then you just put the balance that rolled over from the previous month. And this is also where people track money that they pull from their sinking funds. Y'all see me do this on my spreadsheets as well. So if I took out $500 from my sinking funds, I would put that here, and it's not actually counted as income for me. It's just an extra area on the spreadsheet. Personally, I think it is ideal to track the money that rolls over from the previous month because most of y'all are receiving your paycheck at the end of the month, or you just know that you're using some funds from the previous month into the current month. You got to pay for rent on the first of the month, or pay for your mortgage and pay for all of your bills. That's usually within the first week of the month. And many times you're using money that you already earned from the previous month. So when you're making your budget, you want to consider the money coming in for the month, but also anything that was from the past that you'll be using in that month. Hopefully that makes sense. Another thing that comes up pretty frequently is not knowing where to put something in your budget or in your spending. So then people just put it under a miscellaneous line item or category. So this would look like, I bought a mirror or a blanket, so I just put it under miscellaneous because I didn't know where else to fit it in my budget. Or I bought some hairspray and I put it under miscellaneous because I didn't know where else to put it. So overall, I just don't like a miscellaneous category in anybody's budget because miscellaneous is too broad And that is how you end up spending too much in places that you probably should not be spending. Honestly, I just prefer for there not to be a line item called miscellaneous in your budget. I want you to be paying attention to where you're spending your money. So I want you to be aware of everything that you're spending your money on so you can just keep an eye on things, because oftentimes people would get carried away with miscellaneous and then they look back and they're like, I have no clue what I even purchased. It's just I spent $6,000 this year on miscellaneous. So going back to those examples I just gave, if you buy a mirror or if you buy a blanket, that should probably go under a line item called household. If you bought some hairspray, that should go under a line item called health and beauty or health, beauty, wellness. Whatever you want to call it, just make sure that what you're purchasing fits somewhere in your budget, in one of the line items in your budget, even if you have to add something new. If you bought a new laptop, that's going to go either under personal spending. If you have a business, it could go under business, or you may create a new line item called electronics. So in my opinion, best practice is just to avoid miscellaneous, know where you're spending your money. And then the final thing I want to talk about is adjusting the numbers that you budgeted for the month while you're already in the month. To me, that is a no. If you've set your budget for June, for example, and we are in the month of June, I don't want you to touch the numbers that you budgeted. You're going to track your spending, and that's it. If it's before the month starts and you realize, oh, I forgot to add this in my budget, sure, go ahead and add it. But if it's the middle of the month and you've already set your budget and then you realize, oh, I forgot to budget this, or you end up spending way more in one of your line items, you don't want to adjust what you budgeted. Just track your spending and see what things are looking like for the month. The reason I don't want people to adjust what they've budgeted in the middle of the month is because this gives you a false idea of how you're actually spending your money. It's going to look like you're within budget, but it's not something that you budgeted for. So you may create this illusion that you're doing really well with your budget. And I don't want anybody to feel guilty about their spending, but I want you to be realistic with your spending and recognize, oh, I'm going over budget in this area. Maybe the next month I need to pay attention to it, or I need to adjust the following month. But I want you to have a realistic picture of what you're expecting for your spending and how you're actually spending your money. So yeah, those are just a few things that I've noticed come up throughout my one-on-one sessions and even with my own budgeting journey. But definitely let me know if y'all have any questions or if there's anything with budgeting that you want me to expand on. Otherwise, thank y'all so much for watching. Please give this video a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in my next one.